It pays to remember facts about people. It is common. It is the common wonder of all men how among so many billions of faces there should be none alike. Sir Thomas Brown. Yes, fortunately there are no two faces exactly alike. If all faces did look alike, we couldn't remember them or the names. Memory system is or not. I have been challenged many times to remember the first names of a set of identical twins. So far, I have always been able to spot one difference. However, minute in their face, it is to this difference that I would associate their names. So as the producer, this la difference. If you have studied the previous chapter on how to remember names and faces, and if you have tried the method, you should be greatly improved by now. Although, in most cases, it is the second or family names that most of us want to remember. Some of you may be interested in remembering first or given names as well. This too can be done with conscious association. You can use a substitute word for the first name and get that into your original mental picture. Or you can picture someone you know very well having the same first name with the first thing you wish to remember. Substitute words for the name are easy to find. Harry could be Harry. Clark could be Clark. For William, I always picture a man with a bow and arrow as William Tell. No money or rich always means Richard. To me, Anne could be Aunt. Marion could be marrying. For Gloria, you could see the American flag, Old Glory, etc. If you use the substitute word idea for remembering first names, after a while you will have one at your fingertips. For anyone that you meet, the system of picturing a friend of yours whose first name is the same as the person whom you want to remember might work just as well for you. If you meet Mr. John Citrus, you could use the substitute citrus to associate outstanding feature. Then you put your friend John to the picture somehow in a ridiculous way. You'll remember Mr. Citrus' first name is John. Again, it is not for me to tell you which idea to use. You may use one or both as the circumstance demand. This is entirely up to you. If you find that you can remember first names with one system better than with the other, then by all means use the one that helps you most. If at first you have a bit trouble remembering the first names, don't let it bother you. You just use the second name. Keep at it for a while, and you'll soon be able to remember first names just as well as you do second names, and vice versa. You don't insult anyone by remembering only his or her last name. Benjamin Disraeli had an out even if he forgot both names. He once said, "When I meet a man whose name I cannot remember, I give myself 2 minutes. And if it is a hopeless case, I always say, and how is the old complaint?" Since most of us have some sort of old complaint or other, Disraeli probably flattered everyone. He used this on making them believe he remembered them quite well. However, no need for subterfuge. Use my systems, and you'll remember names and faces. More important, I think, than remembering first names is to be able to remember pertain facts about the people you meet. This holds true for business and social life. Business-wise, particularly since it's often helpful to remember what item or style numbers you sold to a certain customer. Or if you're a doctor, you remember the faces, symptoms, and ailments, etc. It is also very flattering to meet a person whom you haven't seen in some time and have him ask about things that are close to you, but would ordinarily have no interest to him. This will not only make people like you. People always like you if you show an interest in their interest, but can be quite an asset in business. The method is the same as remembering first names. Just put the thing into your original association. When you're memorizing the name and face, if I meant Mr. Biller, whom I wanted to impress, and I knew he was an avid stamp collector, I might associate Bell to an outstanding feature on this face, and then associate stamp to the bell. Some of you may feel that this might confuse you into thinking that the man's name is Bell Stamp, but again, the true memory tells you the difference. You'll know that the name better to make sure you could use Bella in the original association, and you'll be able to flatter him by asking or talking about his stamp collection. During my own performance, I will usually meet doctors, judges, commissioners, mayors, and many people with titles other than Mr. It is essential for me to address them correctly, because even though I remember their names, people with titles may be insulted if I do not use that title, or if I forget it. The same idea applies. I simply put something to my original association, which will remind me of the title. Anything will do. The first object that comes to mind when I hear the title usually always picture a stethoscope to remember me of doctor, because that's the first thing which I associate with a doctor. Of course, scalpel, hypodermic, operating table, or anything that would suffice. When I meet a judge, I always put a gavel into my mental picture. This is enough to remind me to address the person as judge. You might like to picture the judicial robe. That's just as good. Years ago, I recall seeing a picture of New York's Mayor Jimmy Walker wearing a top hat. For some reason, this picture has always stuck with me. Now, whenever I am introduced to a mayor of a town at an affair, I make sure to get a top hat into my association. I have done quite a few performances from servicemen, and I have had to prepare a substitute word beforehand to remind me as to whether the person was a sergeant, corporal, lieutenant, captain, major, or what have you. Lieutenant, captain, major, as I met each man, I would put his substitute word into my association, a name to face, and I did address each man correctly. So you see that any word can be put into your association to remind you of things pertaining to the person as well as his or her name. I have mentioned time and time again the fact that you must use these ideas in order for them to warrant repetition. If you maintain the attitude that nothing can help your terrible memory, then nothing will, because you won't let it. Take a positive view of it all. Try these ideas, and you'll be pleasantly surprised if you've read up to here in this book and tried all these ideas and systems. Up to now, I'm sure you've already been convinced. I've also told you that all these ideas and methods are merely aids to your true memory. If you didn't have the capacity to remember to begin with, you wouldn't remember, no matter how many systems you use, nor could you remember the system. If you were to make an extreme effort to remember, you would. There's no question about that. The problem is that we're all too lazy to make that effort. The system contained in this book simply make it easier for you to make the effort. In order to make your association, you must pay attention to things you want to remember. The rest is easy. If you take far too much time and space for me to tell you how helpful my trained memory has been to me, aside from the public appearances. Of course, people will sometimes carry things to an extreme. I meet and remember approximately 1 to 3 or 4,000 people every week, sometimes more. It would be a little silly for me to try to retain all those names and faces, but I never know when I'll be stopped on the street or in a movie or while driving my car or in some small town that I may have played 2 or 3 years ago and have someone demand, "What's my name?" These people expect me to remember, although I met them with 300 or 400 other people at the time. The amazing part is that 20% to 30% of the time, my original associations made perhaps years ago will come back to me. After thinking for a few moments, then I do know the person's name. In your case, this is no problem, because I'm sure that very few of you have to meet and remember anywhere near 300 or 400,000 people a year. I think that this book probably would never been published if it weren't for the fact that I remember one person's name. I had spoken to Mr. Fell, the publisher, about the book, and the first time I met him, he said he would think about it, and that was about 5 months later. After meeting many thousands of people, I happened to be performing for an all-male group at a charity breakfast. A gentleman approached me and asked if I remembered him. After a moment, I realized it was Mr. Fell. I happened to have heard that I was appearing there, and came down to test me. I told him his name, and weeks later, he all but confess that if I hadn't remembered him, he wouldn't have been half as enthused about the book as he was now. You see, he naturally wanted to be sure that my systems really work. This is the only one instance where remembering one person's name was important to me. Remembering the right person's name is at the proper time may perhaps mean a great deal to you sometime. In the future, it might be bigger stepping stone to a better job or a bigger opportunity or a much better sales contract, etc. So try these systems, use them, and I believe you'll be well paid for your efforts.